In this section we're going to look at how you can customise and change some Windows 7 settings in order to make the operating system work more effectively for you. Let's start with the Start menu. Now by default the Start menu has most commonly accessed programs on the left hand pane and useful links in the right hand pane, but you can customise this. If you right click on the Start menu itself, a context menu will appear and you can select Properties. Now we have various different options. Here the main option that we have in the middle of the screen is to change the default action for the power button. Now you'll see here by default it's set to shut down, but we can, if we want to, set it to perhaps sleep or switch user or hibernate, and you can change the default action of that button. Shutdown will still be there, but it will be shuffled off into the small menu that you access by clicking on the right hand arrow. There are also privacy options here that you may want to untick, and here we can customize the Start menu itself. So we press the Customize button. We can see here that for various options that appear in the right hand side, such as here Documents, Pictures, Music, Games, Computer, Control Panel, we can change these. At the moment they are links in that you click on them and they will open in a window. You can also change them to display as a menu instead. Let's change Computer to display as a menu and we'll have a look at how this works. There are various other options that you can turn on and off. Default programs, devices and printers. We'll turn games to display as a menu as well, so I can show you how it works. So there are lots of options here for modifying the Start menu. One useful one is recent items. So we'll tick this and I'll show you what it is in a minute. There are other options here for displaying recorded TV if you have a television tuner installed in your computer and you use Windows Media Center or similar software. And other options there. Another useful option down at the very bottom here is to use large icons. If you don't want to see large icons, if you'd rather see smaller icons in the Start menu, then you can untick that. Beneath this there are options to change the number of recent programs to display, and also to change the number of recent items to display in jump lists. You'll remember here that if you click on a jump list, recent files or recent places will appear. Beneath that, at the very bottom, is a button to restore the Start menu to its default settings if you make some changes and you're not entirely certain what you changed or how to change it back. When you're happy, click OK. And when we're finished with this menu, click OK again. Now when we go back into the Start menu, you'll see that Games here appears as a menu, so that rather than appearing as a link that you click on to open in a window, you can launch the games directly from the Start menu. Same with Computer, your drives will now appear instead of having to actually click on Computer and open another window. Now we've also got Recent Items now, and Recent Items brings up a list of files that have been recently changed. Now when might this be useful? Well, if you have a program, say Microsoft Word or Adobe Acrobat Reader, pinned to the Windows taskbar, then you can bring up a jump list and that jump list will show you files that have been recently opened and accessed by that program. But the Recent Items list here will show you other files that were opened by other programs that aren't pinned to the taskbar. So it can be a very, very useful and quick and simple way of getting access to files. In the next segment, we're going to look at how we can modify the taskbar as well, and how we can change that. Now we've had a look at how you can modify the Start menu to make it work more effectively for you, let's have a look at how you can modify the taskbar as well. Now the taskbar, as you'll remember, runs along the bottom of your screen. but it doesn't have to. If you right click on it, there's a properties option, but we'll look at that in a minute, and there's also a lock and unlock the taskbar option. By default it's locked, so which means that it's just there, and if you try and drag it anywhere it won't move. So let's unlock it. Now you can move it. You can have it at the top of your screen, to the left of your screen, which is quite popular. You can have it on the right of your screen, or you can move it back down the bottom simply by dragging and dropping it. Also, if you move the cursor to the top of it, you'll see the cursor will change, and you can make the taskbar bigger if you want to. Let's say you want you have lots of running programs on it and you want more space for icons, just make it double height. Can't make it any smaller, but you can make it bigger. Now let's lock it again when we're happy with it, and we'll right click on it and we'll select its properties, and let's have a look at some of the other things we can do with it. Here again is an option to lock and unlock it. We can auto hide it. If we click apply on that, you'll see that it disappears when it's not in use. Move the cursor down to the bottom of the screen, it will reappear. And we can use small icons on it as well. So we'll have a look at that. We can see taskbar has got a little bit smaller. Start button's still the same size. Here are options to change the location of the taskbar, and there are various options here for the taskbar buttons. Now, the three options are as follows. Right, let me explain. By default, when we've been looking at programs so far, we run a program. Let's say we run a couple of instances of Windows Explorer there. You'll see that those two instances of Windows Explorer have been combined into a single icon on the taskbar, and there's no text label to tell you what the program actually is. This is always combine and hide labels. There are two other options here: combine when taskbar is full and never combine. Right? Let's have a look at never combine. It's the same as the previous one, only if the taskbar fills up, then on never combine you'll end up with a little arrow to enable you to scroll left and right on the taskbar. So let's have a look at that. Now look at what happens to those two icons. Immediately they expand, and they text labels appear on them so that you can see what programs they are, and they're available as individual icons and individual programs. And many people find this very, very useful, not only to know precisely what programs are running at the time, but also to be able to get quick and easy access to them. Then there's the notification area. Now, you remember that I talked in a previous section about the notification area here, the little white arrow in the far right of the taskbar. Now you can customize it by clicking on the customize link in its jump list, or you can customize it from this button here. This brings up a window where you can choose what appears in the notification area and what it warns you about. You can even turn off, if you want to, though I wouldn't recommend it, the icons for the Action Center, your network access and your speakers. You can see them here down on the taskbar, and you can change the options. The options for each item are show icon and notifications, hide icon and notifications, and only show the notifications. You'll see other programs that you have run here and other Windows services that can be switched on and off. Now, Windows Live Mail is a good example. Let's say you always want to be notified when new email arrives. Now, the way the Windows 7 taskbar works is if you're running something like Windows Live Mail or Microsoft Outlook, then on its icon on the taskbar, a little mail icon will appear over that to let you know that there is mail. But you can also tell it to show notifications in the system, what was traditionally called the system tray in previous versions of Windows, and if you turn that on, then its icon will then always appear down here on the right hand side of the taskbar when that program is running. There's an option here down the bottom as well to always show all icons and notifications on the taskbar, so you can always have things turned on if you want to, but I would only recommend that you do that if you have a big screen, because your taskbar can end up getting quite cluttered. Finally, there's an option here for Aero Peak. Now, Aero Peak here gives you all sorts of extra facilities, and if we turn that off, then we'll find that all of a sudden Show Desktop doesn't work. They still work, but your Show Desktop icon, you'll actually have to click on it in order to be able to use it. So that's how you customize the Windows 7 taskbar. Now we'll have a look in the next segment at making sure that your time, your date, and some of your regional settings are correct. Now that we've looked at how we can modify the Start menu and the taskbar, let's have a look at some of the other settings in Windows that you might want to change. We'll start with the date and time. Now if you click on the clock in the far right of the Windows 7 taskbar, it'll bring up a calendar and a clock. Now down the bottom of this view is a link to change date and time settings, so we'll click on that. Now this brings up many more options. There's a button here to manually change the date and time. There's also a button to change your time zone, which might be useful. You can see here we're set to Dublin, Edinburgh, Lisbon and London, and you can change that to a different time zone, perhaps if you're travelling or if that's set incorrectly. Windows will automatically adjust for daylight savings time as well, and you can untick this option if you don't want it to do that. Now on the tabs along the top of this window, there's an additional clocks tab, and we can add extra clocks to this view that we see here brought up from the taskbar. Let's say we want to add a clock for, let's say, Buenos Aires. So we can name this clock whatever we want. We'll call it Buenos Aires here. And when we press the apply button, next time we click on the clock on the taskbar, we have another clock here for international times. And as I've said, you can have up to 2 of these additional clocks. Then there's an Internet Time tab. Now by default, Windows 7 will automatically synchronize your date and time with a server on the internet to make sure it's accurate and up to date. But sometimes it can't get a connection to the server. So if you press the change settings button, you can manually update it, and if it can't update it, it will tell you. Equally, if it does update it, it'll tell you as well. And if needs be, you can change to a different time server here on that list. So let's have a look at some of the other regional settings that you might want to change. You access these in the control panel and in the clock, language and region settings. So here we'll click on clock, language and region. Now in this section we can see the date and time settings that we've just changed, so you can also access them here, and there's region and language settings as well. And it's region and language that we want, so we'll click on region and language. Now this brings up a great many more options, including an option to change the format for everything in one fell swoop. But you have much more control here over things like date and time and much more. Now let's say for instance that we want to change the time settings, the long time. We want to change it to this one. The TT means AM and PM. Now we can see here in this box here, this is now what it's going to look like, and when we click the apply button, look at what happens to the clock on the far right of the taskbar. That now changes to AM and PM. But we have even more control over it than this if we press the additional settings button. So let's press that. Now here we've got lots of settings for numbers. You may want to change your decimal symbol if you're in certain parts of the world. You can change your measurement system. You can change currency options here and change your main currency, perhaps the dollar or the euro. And let's have a look at the time settings. Now it's saying here AM symbol and PM symbol. Let's say we want to change these to lowercase. When we press the apply button, they've now changed to lowercase on the clock on the Windows 7 taskbar. And there's more you can do still here still. If we click on the date tab, you can see here an example along the top is the short date is set as such and the long date is set as such. Now there are other options, but a little hint, and one thing that I find very useful, is if you put 4 Ds, and you can see you've got options here written just underneath, 4 Ds and then a space in front of the long date. When you press apply, That long date in the example at the top then will tell you what day of the week it is, and I find that very useful, especially for if you manage your calendar and your appointments diary on your computer. You can also change things like the first day of the week, and there's a button down in the bottom right to reset all of the options for numbers, currency, time and date to their defaults if you've changed something that you didn't mean to and you want to know how to change it back. So you also have a location tab along the top, and here you can change your current location if you're travelling around the world. You can change your keyboards as well. Let's have a look at this. If we press the change keyboard button, we can we can add additional keyboards from around the world and different keyboard layouts. If you don't want the standard US English or British English keyboards, or if it's set incorrectly. And with certain versions of Windows, namely the Enterprise and Ultimate versions of Windows 7, you can install or uninstall additional languages. These options may be available to you. So there are plenty of other regional options that you can change in Windows 7. In the next segment, we're going to start looking at how you change some of the Windows 7 system settings themselves. Now that we've looked at some settings you can change in Windows 7, let's have a look at changing some operating system settings. In this segment, we'll have a look at changing the computer name and work group, and I'll explain what these are as we look at them. Now you can change them by right-clicking on Computer in the Start menu and selecting Properties. They're also accessible in the Control panel in the System and Security section. You can see them here in the System section. Right, see the name of this computer. Down in the bottom of this section, we can see the computer name. Now you might want to change the computer name if it's the same as another computer on your home or office network, and you can change it here to rename this computer or change its domain or workgroup. Click Change. So press the Change button. Here we can rename the PC to whatever we want. If we want to call it Study, for instance, we can call it that. Now, when might you want to change a work group? If you're connected to other PCs in your in your home by using a Windows 7 home group, then you'll be able to connect fine. But if you're connected to other computers in your home or in your small office via a network, let's say you have computers running older versions of Windows perhaps, or other operating systems, you need to make sure that this work group is the same on all of them. Now on some versions of Microsoft Windows XP, for instance, that work group might be called MS Home. It could be called something else, especially if you've been given a laptop by your employer. So if you want to be able to connect to other computers on your network, you need to make sure that the work group is set the same, and you can type in the appropriate name, press OK, and then when you either restart the PC or log off and log back in again, the settings will be changed for you, and you should be able to get in absolutely fine. Now in the next segment, we're going to look at how you can change some of the power options and why you might want to change these in Windows 7. Okay, now we've looked at how we change the computer name in the work group. Let's look at some of the more in-depth settings in Windows 7, and we'll start with the power options. In the control panel, here we have the hardware and sound section, so we'll click on that. Here we have power options here. We have power saving settings, changing what the power buttons do, and more options. Click on power options and we'll have a look at all of them here. Now, by default there are two different plans on a desktop PC. You may see a third plan if you're on a laptop. In the left-hand pane here, there are various options. Require a password when the computer wakes up, choose what the power buttons do, create a new power plan if you want one, choose when to turn off the display, more of that in a minute, and choose when the computer sleeps. Again, I'll talk about that. So we can change the power plan settings by clicking on Change Plan Settings, or switch to a different plan if we want to. So we'll change the plan settings. Now, remember I just mentioned you can choose when to turn off the display and when to put the computer to sleep. Now, if you have a modern flat panel display on your computer, you might not want to use a screensaver, because if a screensaver is on, it's only really there to stop phosphor burning on cathode ray tube type monitors, and there's no benefit to any kind of flat panel display unless you're using a plasma display where you can still get burning. So you can change the time the display before the display turns off and powers down. This not only will save electricity and save power, but it also saves having to use a screensaver at all. You can also have the computer automatically go to sleep after a period. Again, this is a very good way of saving power. And sleep mode, as you may remember I mentioned in an earlier section, is very fast to shut down and very fast to start back up again. But these options here, you can choose for them to never happen, or at whatever option you decide here. There's a link here to restore the default settings for that plan if you've changed them and you want to change them back. And there's a link here to change advanced power settings. So let's have a look at some of these. Now, there's plenty of power settings here, and I'll show you some of the most useful ones. There's also a link here to change settings that are currently unavailable. Now let me give you an example here. At the moment, require a password on wake up is set to no. By default you may find it set to yes, and you might want to change this, but it's greyed out. If you click on change settings that are currently unavailable, and bearing in mind this is protected by a user account control shield, then these settings will then be changeable by yourself. You can change when the hard disk turns off, when your wireless network adapter, if you've got one, turns off, when the computer goes to sleep or goes into hibernate, and one of the most useful ones is the power and sleep button actions. Now, the power button action is what you access here from the start menu, and also what happens if you just press and just tap briefly the main power button on the front of your computer, and that is set to shut down. The sleep button action, you might have a sleep button on your keyboard for instance, is currently set to do nothing, but you can set it to either sleep or hibernate the PC if you want. There are other settings here for turning off the display, and a button for restoring the plan defaults. And when you're happy, press OK, and we'll press cancel. If we go back to power options here, you can see that all of these options are available directly from this panel on the left, and if we want to create a new power plan, we can call it what we want. We can make it balanced, power saver, or high performance, and Windows will give us lots of information here about how much power and electricity we're going to use. Now this is especially important when you're using a laptop or perhaps a tablet computer, when you're going to want to maximize your battery life, and in these options is precisely how you can do it. And you may see additional options here, as I've said, for laptop users. In the next segment we're going to look at configuring more Windows operating system options. Okay, so now we've looked at some Windows 7 system settings we can change. Let's have a look at some advanced system settings that you can change and why you might want to. Now you can get access to these by right-clicking on Computer in the Start menu and selecting Properties. They're also accessible in the Control panel in the System and Security section by clicking on System. And as a reminder, don't forget, you can also use the search box in the Start menu to search for any control panel item. Here we want system information, and that again would bring up the same window. So in this window, which we've seen before, there's a link on the left-hand side to Advanced System Settings. This is again protected by user account control, so you should be careful about what you change, but there are some settings in here that you might want to change. Now, we have the computer name tab that was here before, and we are looking at the Advanced tab. Okay, so let's click on, first of all, the Startup and Recovery section. If we click on the Settings button for that. Now this will tell us if we have more than one operating system installed on our computer, we can choose which one we want to run by default and how long we want the list of options of the different operating systems to appear for. Here it's set for 5 seconds. And if there are recovery options to be displayed, perhaps Windows 7 didn't shut down properly, then you can turn it on and you can change the number of seconds that will appear for. Those are the only settings I would suggest you change there. In the performance section, visual effects and so on, there are some more settings you might want to change here. Now we'll just have a quick look through these. You can adjust them for the best appearance on your screen, for the best performance by your computer, and you might want to select this if, for instance, you have an older computer and it's struggling a bit. Or you can choose custom settings and tick or untick anything that you want. In the Advanced tab here, we have something that's called virtual memory. Now virtual memory is a file on your hard drive that's managed by Windows that enables it to load programs and load the operating system more quickly. Now by default, Windows 7 manages the size of this file, and it grows and it shrinks on a regular basis, and we can change this. And let's have a look at why we might want to change this. As this file grows and shrinks, you want to save other files and documents onto your hard drive. And what can happen over a period of time is that because your files wouldn't necessarily be stored in a logical progressive sequence where they're easily accessible, they end up scattered all over the place. And this can mean that it takes longer for your hard drive to actually access files that it has stored. If you get this virtual memory file and you set it to a set size, then it will always stay at that size, which means that all your files should then end up together, and there'll be less scattering around, and it should speed up the computer slightly. So we would untick automatically manage paging file size for all drives, and we can say we want it a custom size. Now down the bottom here, Windows 7 is telling us the minimum that we're allowed, what it recommends, and how much is currently allocated. What you'd want to do is type that recommended number into both of these initial size and maximum size boxes and press the set button, and you'll see here that it's changed onto the C drive. You can change it to a different drive if you want by highlighting it. The size of the paging file will now be set. When you press OK, Windows is telling us that the next time we restart the computer, then that change will come into effect. This is a very useful change to make because it can speed up access of your files when you need them. Then there is the Data Execution Prevention tab. Now this Data Execution Prevention is a feature within Windows that's intended to stop viruses and malware from playing havoc with your computer, but it can, on rare occasions, prevent you from running something like an online game. If you're having trouble with an online game, you can turn on Data Execution Prevention for all programs and services except those that you select. You can press the Add button, and then you can find an appropriate program in your Programs Files folders, and you can, let's say we want to add the Adobe Acrobat Reader, and we can select the actual program. Here we are, we can see its icon, we can open that, and then we can add it. So those are some useful system settings that you can operating system settings that you can change. But as with all advanced operating system settings, you should take care in what you do. In the next segment of this section, we're going to look at these system protection options and how they can work for you. Right, so now we've looked at Windows operating system settings that you can change. Let's have a look at the system protection, and in the next segment we'll look at backup options. In the control panel main system window, which remember you can get to by right-clicking on computer in the start menu and selecting properties, there's a system protection link in the blue pane on the left-hand side. Click on that. Now, system protection offers several different settings here, and we'll have a look at what each one is. One of which is protection for your drives and for your files. Now, you remember I talked about previous versions of files. Here we can turn previous versions of files on and off for different hard drives and different partitions you've got on your computer. Here we can see a file drive, and it's currently turned off for that. So Windows won't by default save any previous versions of any files there. So if we press the Configure tab, we have three different options here. Keep system settings and previous versions of files, just previous versions of files, and turn off system protection. Now on this particular drive we only have files, we don't have a copy of Windows, so we'll just use it to keep previous versions of files. Now, the larger amount of hard disk space you can reserve for this, I'd recommend about 10%, the more files it's going to be able to keep backup copies of. But you really shouldn't rely on system protection to keep backup copies of files. You should keep separate backups, but we'll talk about that in the next segment. Then there's a feature here called System Restore. You can create a system restore point if you want by hitting this advanced button, hitting this create button here, or press the system restore button to manage system restore. Now by default, whenever you make a major change to Windows or wherever you install a new piece of software, Windows will keep what's called a restore point. This is a snapshot, if you like, of the current system settings and state of the operating system, so that if you make a change and Windows 7 becomes unstable, you can restore to a previous version. We'll have a look here. Now this is telling us that Windows Update did some critical updates, we've installed Windows Live Essentials there, installed another piece of software, and it tells us the dates on when these restore points were taken. You can pick any one and you can press the next button to roll your entire operating system back to the point just before that change was made. So this can be incredibly useful if you, let's say you download some Windows updates and there's a driver in it that's causing problems on the computer. Go into System Restore, which again, remember, if you type System Restore into the search box in the Start menu, you can get to it directly from there, and you can roll the system back. There's also a tick box here to show more restore points if any additional restore points are available that aren't shown in this list here. And as I've said, you can click the Create button to manually create a restore point if you are about to make changes that could affect the system. For instance, we're going into advanced system settings as we did in the last segment. Now in the final segment of this section, we're going to look at the backup and restore options that are available within Windows 7 for the operating system and for your files. Okay, so to round off our section on Windows 7 system settings, let's have a look at probably the most important one of them all, backup. You can access the backup features in Windows 7 in several ways. You can search for them in the Windows 7 Start menu. Here you can see they've appeared there. You can find them in the Start menu under All Programs in the Maintenance section, or you can find it in the Control panel in the System and Security section. Here it says Backup Your Computer. The Action Center, the flag here on the Windows 7 Taskbar may also alert you to create a backup. So let's click up Backup Your Computer. Now, there are various options for backup in Windows 7. You can create a system image. Now, system image is a snapshot of your entire copy of Windows, so that if something disastrous happens, you can restore that system image and be up and running just as you were before the disaster occurred. A system repair disk is a CD or a DVD that you can start your computer from that will enable you to restore that system image. And should you create one, then Windows Backup will automatically prompt you to create a system repair disk. So you should have a blank CD or a DVD ready. Then there's option for Windows Backup. So let's set up Windows Backup. Now, Windows Backup will give you a great many options for backing up your files. Now, by default, Windows Windows stores all your files and documents on the same hard disk or the same partition that Windows itself is stored on, which means that if something disastrous should happen to Windows, you run the risk of losing all of your files, all of your photographs, your video, your music. You run the risk of losing it all, so you should definitely keep backups. Now, I would recommend that you either keep these on CD, DVD, or on an external USB hard disk. They're quite cheap these days, and I think it's the best and easiest way to keep backups. Now, Windows is saying, where do we want to save our backup? It's saying we recommend you save your backup on an external hard drive, as I've just said. I have some additional hard drives installed in this computer, so I can select one of these, or I can select DVD. Let's say I want to back up my files onto DVD. Now, what do we want to back up? Now, if we let Windows choose, then by default it's going to save all the information in your libraries, which is your documents, music, pictures and videos, and it will also back these up on a regular schedule, and it will also back up Windows itself. So let's say, let me choose, and we'll have a look at the options that are available to you. Now, here we're saying it's automatically selected data for newly created users. It'll back up all our libraries, and we can see the libraries that we've got here. And there are other options that we can back up, and it's greyed out at the moment, but there's an option here to include a system image of your Windows drive, and you'll be able to select that. So you can select the options here, and then you can choose the schedule on which Windows will do its backup. Now, if you have an external hard drive, all you need to do is make sure that at the appropriate time it's plugged in, and Windows will automatically handle your backups, and you'll never need to worry about it. If you back up to DVD, as I'm doing here, then it will prompt you at the appropriate time. You can change the schedule here, saying how often you want it to run. I'd recommend it at least once a month, and on what day of the week, and at what time. You can untick it if you don't want it to run the schedule, but you'll need to remember to run it manually. Press Save Settings and Run Backup when you're happy. Now, let's say you've got a backup. In this Restore section, it will tell you when the last backup was done and what it was done to, and it will give you options to recover your files from that backup. There's also a link here to recover system settings or your computer, which takes us back to the system protection options I talked about earlier. Now, a little hint for you. By default, as I said, Windows 7 stores your files and your documents on the same hard drive or partition as Windows itself. Think of it as being in the same box. If you have another hard drive in your computer, or you have a hard drive that's split into two partitions, then you can move those files and data so that if something disastrous happens with Windows, it won't jeopardize those files, and it's very, very simple to do. From the Start menu, click on your username in the top right, and this takes you straight to your user folders. We can select the folders that we want to move away from Windows, in this case documents, music, pictures and videos. Now, what I've done is I've clicked on the first one. If you hold down the Shift key and click on the last one, it will select all the ones in between. Alternatively, you can click on one, hold down the Control key in the bottom left of your keyboard, and click on each folder that you want to move. Right click on any one of these selected ones and select cut. Now all you need to do is go to computer, find another hard disk. It would need to be installed inside your computer, not an external one. Open that hard disk, navigate to the point on that hard disk where you want those documents files to be, right click and select paste, and all of your documents will be moved to that other partition or that other hard disk, so that if something disastrous happens with Windows, you won't lose them, or it would certainly be very difficult to lose them. So that's a tip. Right, well that's all for this section. In the next section we're going to have a little bit more fun, and we're going to look at how you work with programs on your computer.